Welcome to the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast. I'm your host and speaking coach, Deborah Deras, known as the top Latina peak performance speaker. This podcast is here to support you with strategies and best practices of paid speakers so you can find out what works and what doesn't, so you can achieve success with ease and grace in your speaking career. Enjoy the show. Are you a speaker, coach, or consultant and need support with marketing your digital courses and programs? Does doing your newsletter and all of the back-end website updating drive you crazy? Not to worry, I have a great resource for you. Enrich Digital. She helps you eliminate all of the technology overwhelm by doing it for you. Isn't that fantastic? If you want more information, go to enrichdigital.com to meet the tech goddess. Welcome back to another great episode of the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest, Deborah Deras, or as my wonderful producer likes to call me, Debbie Dinero. And I am going to share with you this year, like every year, all of the strategies so that you can position your expertise as an amazing speaker. And because I know a lot of you have written into me, you want even more than just the podcast, I have created a webinar that helps you with 5 steps to be a paid speaker. And you could download it right now at deborahderas.com/speaknow. So without any further ado, I really am excited about today's guest because she's someone that I met personally when I was attending at a conference. And it's really a nice change to be at a conference where I don't have to speak and I can just listen to the speakers and also learn from their style, but also from their marketing strategies. And this woman was such a powerhouse. Like some of the other speakers, I'm like doing my to-do list, I'm checking my Instagram. With Melissa, I was so riveted. I attended her workshop twice. She had 2 workshops and I went to both of them because she is that good. And Melissa Forziat is a Seattle-based marketing speaker. She's a consultant and she's also an author. And she works with small businesses to develop and execute strategic marketing plans and with business organizations to train their trainers. She offers keynotes, presentations, workshops, and webinars. And her speaking schedule is so busy that she's been going to Arizona, Hawaii, Washington, D.C., Texas, and all the way to New Zealand. Wow, Melissa, that's super awesome. She's delivered over 47 workshops to over 1,350 attendees in 9 U.S. states, 2 countries, plus 37 webinars with over 1,600 attendees with collaborative partners in 11 states. Please help me welcome Melissa.
Thank you for having me, Deb.
Yes, as soon as I met you and we had lunch, we said, how are we going to synergize? I need to bring you into everyone's life because you are amazing. Not only do you have great content, but you're a great speaker. But before we get started into all that, how did you get started in your career and what brought you to the field of marketing?
Yeah, so I think the process of getting started in my business is, I would say it's as roundabout as the process of getting started as a speaker, but I think those things feed together really well. I started out in my overall career doing major international sport events. So I worked Olympic Winter Games and Rugby World Cup, and I worked with the U.S. Olympic Committee. So early in my career, I was sort of going from contract to contract and working on these huge events, really getting us a perspective of businesses that are operating at scale. And then 8 years ago, I landed in Seattle and I accidentally started my business. I was networking and I was looking for work and I honestly was looking for a job. And then, one day I strung the words together that I was taking clients and I got a client from it. And, you could say that phrase to 100 people and not get a client from it, especially in the beginning. But it just so happens that I put those words together for the first time and I got a client from it. So it really shifted how I thought about what I was doing. And I loved that it did that because in a way I was almost thinking entrepreneurially going from contract to contract in my previous line of work. But now I was able to take that and really create sort of equity in my own name and put a brand around what I was doing and create stability and consistency from it. So that's how the marketing consulting side of the business started. And the offerings really developed from there. I started working with people in a number of different ways. And eventually that did lead into speaking. I was given an opportunity to speak in front of a group, and I wasn't really sure how to start that. I wasn't sure how to approach it, but I met that moment with a lot of preparation. And in that session, when I was done with 2 hours of talking in workshops, there was a line of people who wanted to talk to me still about their businesses. And I just took it as a moment that, yeah, you're really in the right place doing what you're supposed to be doing right now.
Absolutely. And what a great first client to work with. The Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and just being in that organization, being a part of it, being a part of that team. What do you think small business owners, because I tell every speaker that I coach that as a speaker, you're an expert. And as the expert, you have to run yourself like a business. If you don't, you're going to be going from one gig to another gig and you're going to be struggling. So what did you take from working with the Olympics that can apply to small businesses that they need to have in order to be successful?
I think the key word for me is confidence. And
Mm.
that comes up in a lot of places. I mean, being able to introduce myself as somebody who did Olympic work. I mean, there aren't a lot of things that are bigger than that.
Right.
And I think there's a certain perception that comes from that. But what's really interesting to me is that a lot of people, when they get started in speaking, and this is myself included, they doubt themselves being up in front of the room. They doubt whether they should be there. They doubt their content. They doubt something. And of course you would, because until you've delivered a number of talks, you don't really know what that process is going to be. But yet you have to present yourself with confidence, and you have to negotiate with confidence, and you have to ask for what you want with confidence. So I think for me, the word confidence is a big one. And I think, having a word like Olympic that I can throw around really helps me, but you have to find something that works for you, because there is so much business around speaking in addition to what happens when you're in front of the room.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a good point. The prerequisite for my Synergy Speaker Mastermind is the Speak with Confidence course. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to believe in you. So, and you are such a powerful speaker. I mean, how did you go from marketing consultant, I'm sure behind the scenes, to being able to have so much confident poise and just be so amazing on stage?
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for the compliment. And for me, and I know a lot of people have different ways that they find what their style is. For me, a big factor was that I was doing weekly drop-in improv classes for like
Oh, you're
5 years.
so good. That's your
Yeah,
secret, girl.
it
What?
that really had a big impact for me. They weren't classes per se. It was just sort of a thing that I
Ah,
was doing for fun. We go in, a bunch of us adults, we just make things up for a couple hours. But something about that, it's partly being on stage. It's partly knowing that you're going to be able to respond to whatever's thrown at you. But I think the really big lesson that I take from improv that absolutely translates for me into the speaking world is that when you are doing improv and you're on stage, you are meant to be listening to the audience. As much as you're making things up, you're looking for moments of reaction from them. And whatever that reaction is, you know that you need to go deeper into that area. If they think something's funny, that's the funny thing.
ah.
If they seem like they're not with you, then they're not with you and you need to get them back. So you really learn how to pick up cues from the people who are listening to you. And that has infused into my speaking style, because I want to know that everybody in the room is engaged in what I'm saying, and that I'm able to pull special moments that are happening already. And instead of ignore them, embrace them and really shine a light on them, so that everybody walks out of the room feeling like they were, even if it was a simple workshop, that they had an experience that nobody else is going to have.
I love that. So that's a really good learning point for those of you that are taking notes on this, because it's not just about you speaking. it's a two-way conversation. It's a dialogue. And that you need to not only be mindful of what you're saying, but how the audience is reacting and responding, and to course correct and adjust along the way. I remember when I first started speaking and people would laugh at certain points that I didn't even know was funny. So then once I knew they were funny, I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk about, my Catholic and my Jewish guild, or I'm going to talk about the Manana Wana syndrome, whatever was cueing them to laugh. And I love how you said, use what happens in the room. One of my mentors is Dr. Michael Beckwith. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was in the movie The Secret. But every Sunday, he's in front of 1,500 people. And, inevitably a phone will ring. And he's like, I know you're getting a call to go even deeper now, but right now I want you with me. So he'll use the phone call. So that way, those of you that are lacking confidence that are listening, to get even more confidence, there's nothing that could happen that you can't use. I mean, I've literally spoken, there's been an earthquake, and I'm like, wow, that was really earth shaking, my speech. You know what I mean? Let's go outside.
I had something happen once where the topic that I was presenting on, because I always speak about some aspect of marketing education. And there was a time that I was talking about partnership building and relationship building in order to get a larger client base. And so I was speaking at this chamber of commerce where, there were a bunch of people in the room and I didn't know anything about their businesses yet. And so I posed a question aloud, and it was sort of a rhetorical question, but it was meant to just get people thinking. And I said something like, everybody here wants more clients, right? Or who here doesn't want more clients? And so there was a guy, this big burly guy in the back of the room is shaking his head no. And I thought, well, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do this. So I said, okay, you don't need more clients. What do you do? And he said, I run a prison.
Oh my God.
And I just thought, well, I asked for it. So I said to him, okay. And I let that moment be a funny moment for all of us because they knew that I had just set myself up for this.
Right,
everybody in that room knew him. And so, I said, well, okay, everybody in the room except for, Joe needs more clients. But hey, Joe, you probably need more donors, right? You probably need more funding sources, right?
Right.
So I was able to take the moment, acknowledge it, make it a funny moment that kind of relaxed the room, but then take it, spin it on its head and say, this still applies to you.
Right.
Here's how to look at it to make sure you come out of this room and you feel like you got something from it. And I definitely credit my improv training with that. Even just going, again, not classes, just going to be able to say what's on my mind for a couple of hours and then going home. You really learn that there's nothing that can be thrown at you that you can't handle. And there's so much power in that when you're on stage. You can handle any question. You can handle any scenario. You just work your way through it.
That is a great thing. I am going to now mention that to my coaching clients because I usually say, go to Toastmasters, improve your speaking. But then sometimes you get to be too polished. And then the real world isn't like that. If something goes wrong, I did the same thing that you did. And I said, when we talk about social media marketing, people like to share things that are funny. I said, almost every industry. And then this person raised her hand. She's like, I'm with the Inglewood mortuary. I'm like, okay, maybe not your industry.
Yeah. I mean, you find a way to get through those moments, and it's great because you're all doing it together. Like everybody in that room was there for it. And you can either, in that moment, you can either back away from what just happened and it's something that becomes an elephant in the room, or you can meet it head on.
And that's what I like. You just go, you lean into it, you address it, and then you own the room. And I think that's so important because what we're talking about today is how to be a paid speaker. And to be a paid speaker, you can't just be good. You have to be great and magnificent. Mm-hmm. So how did you book your first paid gig?
So the answer to how I booked my first paid gig is really starting with unpaid gigs.
Right.
Which is not a glamorous answer at all, but it's how I started. I would say, especially for the industry that I speak to, I often speak to either small business owners or organizations that are assembling a group of small business owners. And, a lot of times the micro business industry is not necessarily the big moneymaker. So, for me, I might have started out in unpaid gigs a little bit longer than others who were in the corporate world, but it was a really important relationship building process for me. So, I began with, getting a number of talks under my belt, speaking in different places, trying to get a resume of where I had spoken, the types of organizations I had spoken with. When I did get my first paid gig, it was for actually the conference that you saw me speak at, the America's SBDC conference, but years earlier. So the first time I had applied to speak with them, I was rejected. And, it's for the bigger conferences, there is often an application process that you go through. And, I was a cold application coming in, so I didn't get it. Mm-hmm. But I thought, no, I really do want that opportunity. So that was a national conference, but they had chapters all over, as you know. There are chapters in every state. There are chapters in other countries as well. And so I started speaking for free at some of those other ones. I built some relationships. I went to probably 4, 5, or 6 states, maybe, depending on how you count it, through webinars or through my own dime, paying my way out to go speak there, just so I could get on my resume. Mm-hmm. And then next year, when I applied again for that same national conference, I got it. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I was able to put those referrals and even just those names of places where I had spoken in that application and say, this is, and I found places to put it. There was no place to say, here are my references. I put that in there. I've used this presentation at these 5 other small business development centers. And I was able to incorporate that so everybody would see it in the application process. So for me, it was all very long road. For some people, if you're in the corporate world, maybe you just land one paid gig and it just gets you in front of a lot more. I think once you can get the momentum going, it has a way of really picking up. And that's what's happened for me as well.
And I think the key thing that you said was you decided on your niche. You said, my niche is micro small businesses. Where are the conferences that gather those micro small businesses? And then how can I position myself as the expert to be able to offer my services? And I'm sure in the front or the back of your mind, it wasn't about the speaking, it was about the consulting. Am I right? That was your major?
It was. So that's the thing that there's so many ways to answer the question you just posed, because I always find it interesting, when I go to places like National Speaker Association meetings or, places where a lot of speakers get together to talk, I find that not everybody is as focused on a particular market as I am. Right. Sometimes people by nature are looking to speak across industry, right, but sometimes they just haven't decided yet what they're going to do. And I find that to be such a disadvantage. Right. Like, I always wonder about that process, because for me, when I speak in front of a room full of people, not only do I have a potential for front end sales from a contract, but I have a lot of potential from sales in the room.
You sure do.
If I'm able to speak to business owners, those people could hire me in any number of ways, for online courses or for hourly consulting or projects or implementing their marketing work. And I want all of those things to be able to feed into and out of each other. Mm-hmm. So the really interesting process for me in doing a number of unpaid talks in the very beginning was I learned a lot about the tools that I needed to create to make the most of every room. When I'm allowed to sell or when I'm not allowed to sell, or when I only have a little bit of time or I have a lot more time, I've created all of these different tools to make sure that I'm capturing as many leads in the room as I possibly can. Whereas a lot of people because I know where it's leading, and a lot of people who haven't really figured out what their niche is, they don't know how to create that stuff that'll help them get more opportunities in the room. So I've been so glad that I've been this focused for a lot of reasons, including those.
And I absolutely agree with you. Like, my focus is professional Latinas when I speak at organizations on peak performance. So when I'm coaching people, I always talk about niching your niche. And you have done that in such a great way. And I think a lot of speakers also don't consider consultation and online programs as streams of income. They just think of speaking and that's it. But being in this industry for over 18 years and being a part of the National Speakers Association since 2002, I have seen the industry be amazing, and I have seen it wash up after September 11th, after 2008 when we had that crash, like nothing. Right. So I know to have the consultations, but there is some genius things that you do. I saw you in action. I was like, ooh la la, where you're able to get people into your world. And you were the one that inspired me to reignite my newsletter. Can you talk to how you get leads from every speaking gig?
Well, I think that changes so much depending on first of all, what I'm allowed to do in the room,
Right.
and then how much time I think I'm going to have at the event. So, for example, one of the things, I'll pick a specific scenario, like at the conference that you saw me speak at, I was at that was, a several day conference, and I was going to be there for the entire conference. And I made sure that was part of my arrangement up front, where I could just be on site. And so I made sure to make a lot of relationships all throughout the event. But I knew that there's only so many people that I'm going to be able to talk to immediately after the talk is done. Mm-hmm. That's always the case. It's especially the case for me because I'm really introverted. So what happens is I get into a deep conversation with one person, and then there's a line of 5 people who want to talk to me, and eventually they start leaving because they have to go somewhere. Right. And I hate this idea that, what were they going to say? Mm-hmm. Like, what was that conversation going to be? So I actually learned to call that out right away. At the end of my presentation, before I take questions, I put my email address up on the screen and I say, look, I'm really introverted and I want to spend time talking to each and every one of you who want to talk to me, which means that it might not all happen right after this talk is done. Here's my email address. Let's come up with a time when we can connect while we're all still in the same city.
And we'll do it. You did say that.
And and it's been so effective for me because I literally cannot talk with everybody afterwards. I just get too focused on the conversation. And that's why you want to talk to me, but there's a limited amount of time real estate there to work with. So yeah, what ends up happening for me is if I'm at a conference for a longer time, I end up booking out the rest of my stay there with coffee meetings and lunch meetings and everything. I end up being fully booked for the rest of the conference.
You are such a genius. That is so smart, because speaking is just one part of being a professional speaker. The other 80% is working the room. And I remember I used to leave right when I was done from the stage. I was like, oh my God. Like this last conference that I just spoke at, I stayed till the entire end of the conference, even though I wasn't speaking the next day. But in the contract, I had them get me a hotel for the next day so I could stay and network. But that is so important.
Yeah, I think it is. Now, to be fair, because I know that a lot of different kinds of speakers listen to your podcast. So there are absolutely people out there who are making most of their money from front end sales. Mm-hmm. And, they're signing a contract with whoever's hiring them. They're making the money off of that. And, they're going to try to hit, especially in the busy seasons, as many events as they can in a short period of time. So they don't want to linger at the event. They don't have time. That's maybe an opportunity cost of thousands and thousands, maybe $10,000, right? So if you're in a space where, you're charging $10,000 per keynote or something, and you're just constantly on the road going to places, maybe you don't feel it is as worthwhile to you as it is to me to stay at the event and linger. But if there is an opportunity for you to get more out of building connections in the room, how can you do that with whatever your circumstances are? You just have to get creative. Whatever restrictions you're given, you can always find an angle. And it's all about sort of just saying, what is the best case scenario for me coming out of this? What's realistic for me? And then work with that and find a solution. It's just a lot of problem solving, really. And, I absolutely appreciate that people have different speaking models. So what works for me may not work for you, but my solutions came from saying, okay, this is a scenario that I'm dealing with, and how do I make the best of this situation with the circumstances that I have?
So true. Yeah. One of the things that I learned from you in our lunch conversation afterward was the importance of your email list. And recently at a speaking engagement, I knew I was going to give them a lot of content. And what I did beforehand was I created a webinar of the same speech, but with the PowerPoint and me video explaining it. And because I said, I know from my speech, you're only going to get like 20% that you're going to retain, and you're going to want to get it all. So, go to my website and download this, and you get the webinar, and then everyone get on my email list. I'm like, Melissa will be so proud of me.
There's so many pieces of like the digital footprint that have been pivotal for me to succeed.
Can you talk about one? Because we have like 2 minutes.
Yeah, the newsletter piece is a big one because, and a lot of people hate the idea of newsletters because you feel like, how am I going to keep coming up with content? You know, you find a way to map that out in the beginning and then you stick with it and you stay consistent. I've got weekly newsletters that come out and they're, you know, me giving a meaty piece of marketing advice for free every single week. So the people who are on that newsletter list include people who could hire me to speak and people who could hire me to consult for them. And, you know, it's all over the place, but it's so great because when I go to talks, a lot of times those organizers, they are already on my list and they can plug my list to the whole audience and say, look, I've been getting her marketing tips every week and they're amazing. And we're happy to have her here and you should sign up. And it's like, thank you. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. So newsletters, I think, are one of the most important things you can do just to stay relevant and to keep your audience warm as long as possible until they're ready to work with you.
Speaking of that, I think all of you that are listening need to get on her newsletter because this woman knows what she's talking about. If she can run the Winter Olympics, she could run your speaking business. So how can they stay in touch with you? How could they get on their newsletter list? And I know you have some online programs as well. So just let them know.
So the best place to start is my website, which is melissaforziatevents.com. And I'm hoping we'll be able to put a link to that in the show notes. And basically from there, you can get to my newsletter list. You can download, I have a free ebook called Small Business Marketing on a Budget that has tons of advice if you're trying to market on a budget. So those are great places to start. You can also find a lot of my archived marketing tips of the week there as well. So you can check those out. There's so much information there. You could spend a while exploring it.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely have it in the show notes. And then where can they follow you on social media?
The best place is to find me on Facebook at Melissa Forziat Events. Okay. And then I do have a presence on Twitter and LinkedIn as well, but I'm most active on Facebook. And I've got a lot of networking events that I run on my Facebook page. So that's a great place to meet other businesses that could potentially partner with you, or, you know, as you look for opportunities in your business or your speaking business.
I love it. I love it. I don't know how you keep up with all those emails and all that you do, but you are amazing. And I'm so grateful that you were able to share your strategies and your wisdom here. And thank you all for tuning in to another great episode of the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast. Like I mentioned before, if you want to get a free webinar on 5 steps to be a paid speaker, you could go to deborahderas.com/speaknow. And remember, you are a messenger for a very important message. Thank you for tuning into the Be a Paid Speaker Now podcast. If you want to be a paid speaker right now, you can download the 5 steps to get started as a paid speaker right on my website. Just go to deborahderas.com/speaknow. And remember, with the power of synergy, anything is possible.